Hello everyone, I have another color swatching video for you. I'm going to be swatching another watercolor product from Lidl, more specifically the watercolor pencils. And this time I also have a sample coloring for you. I will be coloring this image and I will give you my thoughts about these pencils as well. So here are the pencils. They come in a metal tin and you get 24 pencils and a brush. And the cost is around €7. So let's start the swatching. The pencils do not have any names on them, neither they have any numbers. I put numbers on the back of them later because there is no point to have a swatch and not knowing which pencil it is. As you see, there are two yellows, I guess lemon yellow and cadmium yellow. The second yellow is more saturated, but both of them are very nice. Then there are two oranges, both very pretty. The colors are a bit pale, but I used a watercolor cardstock that is not bright white, which also influenced how vivid the colors are. This cardstock was also a little bit rough and you could see the texture of the pencil. I guess I should have used different cardstock, but for the swatching it does not really matter. For the coloring I will be using the Canson XL, which was much better. After the oranges there are reds and pinks. The second pink is really pretty, at least in my opinion. It's one of my favorites. And I will be using it later to color the flower. Next, there are a few greens. Some of them are on the turquoise or teal side, still very pretty. By the way I was applying the pencil, I used first the pencil and applied it filling about 3/4 of a rectangle shape. And then I used a damp brush and spread the color around, trying to create a gradient, but that was not too important. In the set, there are also a few very pretty blues. In my last video, I swatched the watercolors in tubes from Lidl, and there I did not like the blues at all. Here, the blues are lovely, something I would expect the blue to be when it is in a set. There is also a purple color, very nice purple, and then the rest are earthy colors. Browns, grays, black, and the last color is white. The swatch is done. I really love the colors, they are very pretty. At least compared to the Lidl watercolors in tubes that I swatched in my last video. Now let's test them and color an image. First, a quick information about the image and the coloring, and then I will be talking about the pencils. I picked this image of a flower. I got it from the website Freepik. I will leave the link to it in the description. I printed it on a Canson XL watercolor cardstock. Freepik had the option to download the Photoshop file, which allowed me to remove some of the lines. That's why it looks a bit different, but overall that's not necessary. For the coloring, I used the bright pink for the petals. I also used brown for the shading, but then I switched it to red. I thought it was a better option. And for the leaves, I used the dark green with a little bit of blue. I applied the pencil color the same way as I would apply watercolor markers. I applied it at the bottom of the petal or a leaf and where I thought a shade would be. And then with a damp brush, I activated the color and spread it across. My coloring is definitely not scientific. I also used a water brush instead of a normal brush with water. This is something I like to do when I'm using watercolor pencils or markers, but you can use a normal brush with water. I personally don't like applying multiple layers when using watercolor pencils, especially when they are still wet. it's better to wait when they are fully dry, but there are times I need to get more color right away because I did not apply enough color with the pencil, like here on this petal. I didn't want to wait or dry it with my heat tool because I did not think it will work, but at the same time I also needed more color. What you can do in this situation is to use the tip of your brush and swipe it along the top of the pencil. This way you scoop the color without using the pencil on the wet paper. I never had good results doing that when using watercolor pencils, not even when it was dry. It can be that the image was not fully dry. I have to experiment a little bit more. I don't know if this is different with more expensive watercolor pencils. I only ever use the cheap ones. And the scooping method, where you use the tip of the brush and take the color directly from the pencil, is my preferred method to add more color. The scooping of the color with the brush I also do when I add additional color, like for the shading or mixing colors, like I will be doing on the leaves, where I will be adding the blue. As I was applying the pencil, I mainly used just one color, one shade. One is completely enough because you can apply more pressure or apply more layers to make it darker, and to make it lighter, you just apply less pressure. Overall, when it comes to the watercolor pencils in general, regardless of the brand, I really like to use them for coloring, especially images for greeting cards because they are not too big. I don't know how would they perform to create a landscape painting or painting on an A4 cardstock. This is something I just would not do with watercolor pencils. For that, I would use normal watercolors. But I saw watercolor artists using watercolor pencils to add details to their paintings. I also think watercolor pencils are really good for beginners. I personally struggle with watercolor control when using normal watercolors, and when using watercolor pencils, I don't have such problems. So that's why I think they are really good for beginners. That's my opinion on watercolor pencils in general. Now let's talk about these specific watercolors from Lidl. Are they worth it? Well, they cost €7, just like the watercolors in tubes. I'm guessing no one is expecting a high quality. While I'm not an expert on watercolor pencils and using watercolor pencils for painting and coloring, overall, I have no complaints. I really like them. They are for sure not high-end watercolor pencils that professional artists would use. But for the price, they are great. Definitely way better than the Lidl's watercolors in tubes that I tested last week. These pencils are probably my favorite watercolor product from Lidl. Actually, the only thing I don't like about these pencils is that there are no names or numbers. That's really the only thing I could complain about. All I would recommend is using a smooth watercolor cardstock like the Canson XL. The application is just much easier. Maybe one additional thing that is negative, not for me, I don't mind it, but there are people that for sure will not like it. And that is the pencils are quite streaky, which I think is common with cheaper watercolor pencils. What I mean, they do not dissolve perfectly and you will see some of the pencil strokes. As far as I know, this doesn't happen with more expensive watercolor pencils. This varies from color to color, from pencil to pencil. Not all pencils are the same. This mainly happens when you try to cover bigger areas like the bigger petals. And also it depends on what kind of watercolor cardstock you're using. Also, I would recommend trying a water brush. Compared to normal brushes, water brushes have plastic bristles and it can be that they help the color to move around better. Also, avoid using the pencil on a wet paper. That's where most streaks for me happen. Try scooping the color with the brush instead. You will probably not eliminate all the streaks, but it helps. And on the leaves here on this flower, I did not get any streaks. It might be the bigger the area, the more streaks you might get. And you can always wait for the painting to dry completely and apply second layer. If applying directly the pencil doesn't work, try the scooping of the color. But as I said, this is not a problem for me. This is more like additional texture or different look. But if you need a perfect application, maybe these pencils are not for you and you will need to try something more expensive. These pencils are definitely perfect for beginners and people who just want to color and don't mind a little imperfections. I mean, this set of watercolor pencils costs less than €10. I think it was €6.99, which is similar number in dollars. And you get 24 pencils, the color selection is great, and they are quite vibrant. For that, these pencils are absolutely amazing, and that's why I would actually recommend them. Of course, unless you don't mind the little imperfections that I mentioned earlier. So the coloring is done. I had a lot of fun. As I said, I really like these pencils and I would recommend them, especially to those of you who do not have money to throw away on anything expensive. For the price, this is a really good option, at least in my opinion. So here is the card I made. I added a little bit of splatter using a gold paint, which I managed to smudge a bit, but that is no problem. I also used the gold paint to create a border. This is something I like to do. The greeting I added when I printed the image, so nothing extra there. I adhered the panel on top of a white card base. Since the watercolor cardstock is not bright white and doesn't match the white of the card base, the golden frame helps to separate it and blend it better. If you have these pencils, let me know in the comments what you think. Also, check out my swatch video for the Lidl watercolors in tubes that I made in the video before this one. And I also created a playlist with videos where I use different painting products from Lidl if you would like to see more examples. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.